Hello ladies and gentlemen, Happy New Year and welcome once again to the Hidden Island. Looks like we have a much bigger audience than we did last time around, so I'd like to quickly extend a warm welcome and thank you to everyone new with us here today. We can't do what we do here without you, so thank you very much for joining our little community, and if you haven't yet, please like and subscribe to keep the music alive. You know, now that the Wano arc is starting to come to a head, there are a lot of exciting discussions happening in the One Piece community right now. Zoro and Sanji have been brought to new heights through battle, new revelations about King and Kaido, CP0 is starting to make their move, and destruction is looming over the Flower Capital. With all these crazy developments occurring at the same time, it's no wonder that I've seen some equally important topics fall a bit to the wayside. One such topic is the nature of our mysterious 10th Straw Hat who has yet to join. For a while, the focus was on Yamato, and a few important lines of dialogue left many people in the One Piece community convinced that Yamato would be our newest addition. But I think that we still have another major candidate, and more importantly, a literary parallel to our Oni princess in question. That character is Kozuki Momonosuke. It may not be immediately apparent, but these two characters are seemingly written with each other in mind. In fact, they are so much more similar to one another than you might first realize, and in a way, they're also polar opposites. Because of this, I can't help but question what the future holds for both Momo and Yamato. It seems almost obvious, right? The war ends, Momo becomes shogun, and Yamato joins the Straw Hat crew. Everyone parties, and we move on with our lives, but on closer examination, I find myself coming to the opposite conclusions. The more I look into it, the more I've actually become open to the possibility that Yamato will be the one to remain behind in the land of Wano, and Momonosuke will be the newest addition to the Straw Hat Pirates instead. I'm not going to call this a theory, because if I'm being honest, it could go either way. I just want to raise some questions on a topic that I feel doesn't get enough shine. So for today, I'm just going to do a brief compare and contrast between these two characters and touch a little bit on what I think the true message of the Wano arc is, and hopefully as a result, we might be able to make some educated guesses as to what post-Wano holds for both Yamato and Momonosuke. Also, because I know someone in the comments will feel the need to bring this up, regarding Yamato's gender, I will simply be following the standard outlined here on the One Piece wiki to keep things nice and unbiased. With that out of the way, let's start off and take a look at our crewmate contenders. Behind door number 1 is Prince Momonosuke, the son of Kozuki Oden. Behind door number 2 is the Oni princess Yamato, the daughter of Oden's killer, Kaido. Momonosuke is weak, unimpressive, and cowardly, but he desires to be a leader. Yamato, by contrast, is inhumanly strong, very bold, and courageous, but she desires to be a follower. Both characters differ greatly from their fathers. In terms of tenacity, strength, and appearance, Momo and Oden couldn't be more different. People tend to be surprised they're even related. When it comes to personality, moral values, and ideals, Yamato and Kaido are light years apart, so much so that she disowns him as a father, which brings up another point, that Yamato's relationship with Kaido is absolutely terrible, while Momo had a very loving, caring father in Oden. Going even further, Yamato's father wants her to be the shogun of New Onigashima, but Yamato refuses. No, Yamato wants to go out to sea and join other pirates instead. On the other hand, Momo is also expected to become shogun. He is expected to live up to his father's legacy, however, he doesn't seek pirate adventures. Unlike Yamato, he wants to be the shogun, but he's too weak to do it and is forced to ask pirates for help from the outside. In fact, both Yamato and Momo have opposite goals. Yamato was a prisoner stuck inside of Wano trying to get out. Momo was an exile lost at sea far away from Wano trying to return. Believe it or not, folks, there is quite a bit more. For the sake of Oden's legacy and Wano's freedom, both Yamato and Momonosuke sacrificed 20 years of their own life. At age 8, Yamato witnessed Oden's execution. From that day onward, she called herself Kozuki Oden, and ever since that day, Kaido imprisoned her within Onigashima. She believed in Oden's message so much that she chose to spend 20 years of her life as a prisoner. At age 8, Momonosuke also made a similar choice. The war to take back Wano was in full swing, and he felt as though he couldn't do anything to help, but Momo was very determined to become a man that his father could be proud of, so he made a serious and permanent decision. He used Shinobu's power, instantly growing older and likewise sacrificing 20 years of his life. As of this recent glow-up, both Momo and Yamato are age 28. They both possess mythical Zoan devil fruit powers, and even more coincidental is the creature they happen to turn into. Momo's fruit allows him to become a dragon, just like Kaido, while Yamato's fruit turns her into a mythical wolf or dog. Funny thing is, the dragon and the dog are opposite signs in the Chinese zodiac. And then there's their relationships with other characters. Momo was born aboard Whitebeard's ship and spent time journeying with the Roger pirates, while Yamato's first and possibly best friend was Roger's son, Ace, who also became the 2nd Division commander of the Whitebeard pirates in place of Odin. They both also quickly bonded with Luffy. Momo meets Luffy in a basement while Yamato meets Luffy in an attic. In both instances, they are trapped and Luffy helps free them. They both help Luffy to fight Kaido, and they are both currently working together to stop Onigashima from destroying the Flower Capital. In almost every recent scene in the manga, Yamato and Momo are either seen together or seen with Luffy. Guys, the more we read into the writing behind these characters, the more that we'll find. In fact, there's still a major common denominator between our two candidates, the Big Daddy himself, Kozuki Odin. If there's one thing truly connecting Yamato and Momonosuke, it's that they both strive to carry on and live up to Odin's legacy. And I think they both succeed in this goal, but in completely different ways. See, in the Odin flashback, we get well acquainted with the man himself, but more importantly, we get to see him develop and grow as a character. Because of this, we see two versions of Odin. When we first meet this character, he is a wild, seemingly invincible, bandit-like figure in the prime of his youth. He's a thrill-seeker, can clash with the greatest fighters of his era, and does what he wants whenever he wants. However, he has no regard for his family lineage or his duty to his country. Most of his actions, while done with no ill will, find ways to cause problems for others, and rather than use his immense capabilities to actually help, he instead leaves his home to see the world outside. When he finally accomplishes this years later, he starts to show new sides to his character. We see the person Odin has evolved into. By the end of his story, this version of Odin was somewhat tamed by his experiences. He didn't care for battles and pirates and harems anymore, but would rather settle down, marry, and raise a family. This Odin elected to return home and finally take the lead for his people. He understood the truth behind his clan, and his passion shifted from escaping his country to liberating it. But this mature, noble version of Odin came at the cost of some vulnerability. He was no longer this invincible force of nature, nor was he the battle-hardened wild card he used to be. He is now held back by the new things that matter to him, like family, duty, and the well-being of his people, and for this reason, he loses against Kaido and goes from would-be shogun to political prisoner. This brings us back to our main discussion. If we were to look at the two sides of Odin in the story, the young, wild, daredevil, adventure seeker, and the mature, experienced leader and martyr of Wano, we'll find that Yamato shares a lot in common with the former. She is powerful and as free-spirited as Odin was, but is bound by her bloodline to a duty she doesn't want to accept. Her father likewise expects her to become shogun, even though she'd rather set sail. She is a prisoner within her own home who wishes to go out and see the world, just like the Odin we first meet. In contrast, Momo seems to share more in common with the older, more experienced Odin. He has set out to sea. He isn't a prisoner trying to escape, but a leader trying to return. Despite his age, where Momo lacks in his strength and adventurous spirit, he makes up for it in his maturity. Sure, at 8 years old, Odin was picking fights with the Yakuza and being a smarmy little badass, but at the same age, Momo is engaging in war with an emperor, shouldering the entire fate of his ancestors and fighting for the right to lead his country, something that Odin wasn't capable of doing until the latter half of his life. They were both heirs to the throne, both set to be publicly executed, and both had the same defiant response towards Kaido when faced with their death. Unlike Yamato, Momo truly wants to be shogun. It's his dream. He doesn't want to set out to sea, but he does so because he must. In simple terms, Yamato and Momo both take a lot after Odin. They are both successors to his will and have overlapping goals, yet what separates them is which aspects of Odin's legend they carry on: the warrior and the leader, Yamato and Momonosuke. Together they make up both sides of the proverbial Odin coin. With all this said, it may seem like I'm making a good argument in favor of Yamato joining the Straw Hats. After all, Yamato is a fighter. She's capable and can more than hold her own in the Grand Line. She's the one seeking adventure, not Momo, and she has a lot more in common with the Odin who first set out to sea with Roger. It may seem hard to imagine at this point that someone like Momo is more well suited to be a part of the journey. However, a gut feeling inside me tells me that we are being bamboozled here. In a way, Yamato seems too perfect for the job, so much so that I can't help but feel that Oda is throwing a red herring at us to keep us off Momo's trail. For those that don't know, a red herring is a literary device where the author provides a very misleading clue for the purpose of distracting from something else and leading the reader to a false conclusion. In metaphorical terms, the author uses the strong smell of a tasty herring fish to distract us hounds from the tastier rabbit right over there. See where I'm going with this? Yamato is a character we only just met at the tail end of the longest arc in the story, during the conclusion of a saga spanning a decade of publication. She is never mentioned at any point prior in the story, she has no major influence on anything leading up to this raid setup, and frankly just pops out of thin air. But when she does, Yamato not only has ties to Kaido, but to Odin and Ace as well. She just so happens to be an elite fighter, a good person, and is practically throwing herself at the Straw Hat crew. No convincing needed, no character arc needed, she's just ready to join and ready to fight. It's all just too perfect. Too easy. More easy than it's ever been for any other character who's ended up joining. Had Yamato been introduced at the beginning of Wano, it would be a different story, but Yamato jumps into the story 80 chapters well into this arc. On the surface, Yamato seems like a shoo-in, but the more I examine beneath the surface, the more unsure I become. All I'm saying is that it's quite strange when we look at how Oda has written every other crew member before, and feels almost like Yamato is meant to be a diversion. When you consider all the similarities between Yamato and Momo, it seems even more like, at least from a writing perspective, that she's covering for Momonosuke, or maybe even modeling for him. Yamato may very well encapsulate the image of his father that he has yet to live up to, the spiritual embodiment of Odin, protecting Momo until he makes the fateful decision to grow up himself. And while her character is being used to set up this plot point for Momo, we're all distracted by the idea of Yamato joining the crew. Okay, so what makes Momonosuke a better candidate for the crew than Yamato? Good question. Number 1. Yamato is too fucking strong. First off, I don't want to hear someone moan and groan about power scaling in the comments. Differences in fighting ability are an integral part of One Piece, worth examination, and can be indicative of a character's role in the story. Kuzan, for example, is not going to be joining the crew. You and I know this first and foremost because we know and recognize he is such a powerhouse, and that the idea of Kuzan fighting alongside Zoro or Sanji is just ludicrous. He would completely shatter and obliterate the monster trio dynamic, overshadow most if not all of the crew in combat, and would draw the attention away completely from other established crew members. It would be like Kaido joining the crew, which I don't even want to entertain. I am of the opinion that Yamato, while not as extreme an example as Kuzan, fits this same criteria. This, of course, is not something Luffy would consider when adding someone to his crew. Luffy isn't thinking about the delicate balance of power on his crew and how it affects the narrative of the manga he's in. Oda is, and I'm confident that if Oda planned on adding this character to the crew, then he wouldn't have written Yamato in this way. He wouldn't have Kaido almost immediately put Zoro in a full-body cast, knock out Luffy 3 times, and nearly kill Law. Meanwhile, Yamato manages to spar with the same character just fine over multiple chapters and come out mostly unharmed. She is basically capable of one-shotting members of the Flying Six. In fact, she can use the same attack that Kaido used to one-tap Gear 4 Luffy. I wouldn't be surprised at all if she could handle a fight with a Calamity and win. I'm gonna repeat this. She fought Kaido, Emperor of the Sea Kaido, from multiple chapters and came out of it with a couple scratches at worst. Realistically, does anyone think Sanji, for example, could have pulled that off? And then there's her Devil Fruit. Yamato also has mastery over a mythical Zoan, the rarest type of fruit in the story. Aside from her transformation also being a horned, 4-legged animal, her mythical fruit and general combat abilities almost by default make her a more useful Zoan than Chopper. If Yamato were to join, Chopper would likely be even more sidelined than he already is. Guess he better stick to making antibiotics. I don't care how much the scale of the story is ramping up or how quickly the Straw Hats are leveling up as fighters. This is just way too much. Let's compare this with Momo. He is, or at least was, way too weak to participate in any actual fights, but he doesn't change the power dynamic of the crew, and he doesn't overshadow or sideline other crew members by being there. He used to be a liability since he was just a little defenseless kid, but by adventuring with the crew he's come to develop a lot of courage and self-confidence. And now that he's older, he is without a doubt more physically capable, and his devil fruit is actually useful. He is now just as capable of participating as anyone else. Sure, he's a complete novice at fighting, but that's a good thing. We have room for this character to grow and improve like everyone else over the story. He isn't starting out at the peak of his abilities, and being the son of Odin and a Dragon Zone user, he has the upward potential to bring something incredible to the table. Number 2. Yamato has Conqueror's Haki, aka she's really, honestly, too damn strong. Please stop. Conqueror's Haki is special because of how rare it is. It's 1 in a million. Only the most powerful characters in the series possess it. It's not something that every other character should be throwing around, and narratively much less something that we should expect to be commonplace on the Straw Hat crew. For the longest time, what separated Luffy from his crewmates as a fighter and what's made him especially appropriate as a leader was his ability to use Conqueror's Haki. This was completely unique to him and put him on a pedestal above everyone else as a conqueror, a king, and a captain. Now Zoro has that same power, but it's appropriate because he's the first mate and essentially vice captain of the crew. But let's say everyone started getting conquerors: Sanji, Jinbei, Robin, and so on. I'd say it would lose its luster and cool factor very, very quickly. And in-universe, it would also mean that the crew is full of characters who have kingly dispositions. In other words, too many leaders and not enough team players. It's a common joke in the One Piece community that during an arc, the crew will devise a plan in a foreign land and then suggest that they don't raise any alarms, cause a scene, or get into too much trouble. And every single time, without fail, almost immediately afterward, our two conquerors, Zoro and Luffy, do exactly that. They raise alarms, cause a scene, and get into trouble. They always end up getting separated from the crew and getting into crazy situations. They are leaders, and no matter how crudely they do it, they are the two characters who barrel and blaze down a path, clearing it for their team behind them. But if the entire crew was doing this, it would be a complete mess. One of the reasons that the Rock's pirates failed is because they had too many conquerors, too many leaders, too many cooks in the kitchen. Speaking of cooks, Yamato having Conqueror's Haki would kind of invalidate Sanji in the monster trio dynamic. I don't think it's a stretch to say that Yamato would be the second or third strongest on the crew by default, and with all the emphasis being placed on the wings of the Pirate King this arc, it would be incredibly jarring to introduce another crewmate that happens to have conquerors, while Sanji does not and probably never will. Yes, I know that Odin had conquerors as well, and I know that Roger had 3 conquerors at least on the crew. However, Roger also had like 40 crew members, not 10. The ratio is very different. Plus, Odin was only a temporary addition to the crew for a year, and at the end of the day, we didn't spend 1,000 chapters developing a crew dynamic between Roger, Rayleigh, and Scopper. It's different. There's just no way to slice this pie in which Yamato doesn't get too big a piece. Momo, by contrast, is not confirmed to have access to any types of Haki right now, let alone Conquerors. While his father did have it, and genetics are implied to play a role in Conqueror's Haki, his father was also a 6-foot-tall fighting machine at the age of 10. I think Momo has a long, long way to go before he can get to that level. Number 3. Yamato knows too much. I'm surprised that people don't talk about this part more. Odin kept a log of all his life's adventures. He chronicled his entire journey with Roger all the way to Laugh Tale. He straight up wrote about the moment they found the One Piece. You ever buy a strategy guide for a video game? Those big books that basically walk you through the entire game, tell you what to do, where to go, what items you'll find? Yeah. Odin's log might as well be a One Piece strategy guide, and Yamato is in possession of this book, which most other people, including Kaido, don't even know exists, but they sure would love to have it. This person has not only read this book from front to back maybe thousands of times, but revolves her entire personal code around it. She clearly has knowledge about the D-Clan, she knows for a fact that the One Piece exists, and maybe even knows what it is. In other words, Yamato is a massive walking spoiler for the story, and we all know how Luffy feels about spoilers. He would rather quit everything and go home than know if the One Piece is even real. And what, is Yamato gonna join the crew and stay completely silent on the subject for the next 200 chapters? Wouldn't it also undermine Robin's role as archaeologist? She has this very important job of having to do the research and put the puzzle together. Meanwhile, there's this other character right over there with a cheat sheet in their pocket. Seems a bit unfair, no? To be frank, it would just be terrible writing, and sure, granted Momonosuke was reading the logbook as well after Yamato briefly handed it to him, but I honestly don't think this was more than a quick glance at the book. With everything going on, and the beast pirates trying to execute him, I don't think Momo stopped right there and read through the entire journal. Anyway, number 4. Yamato is way too late to the party. No matter how much screen time she's getting right now, Yamato is just here way too deep in the plotline. Sure, she does actively want to sail with Luffy, but if Yamato didn't straight up ask, then in what universe would the reader organically expect this addition? Who would be looking for a new, still highly underdeveloped side character to suddenly become a part of this beloved lineup of main characters? And right near the end of the story, no less. Brook's addition was kind of sudden, but he was also introduced before the time skip even happened, and more importantly, at the beginning of his arc rather than the end. There was a ton of time for Brook to develop and grow on us. Yamato, by contrast, does not have time on her side. From here on out, in the story, we're going to have to be tackling the world's biggest problems and mysteries, not spending time fleshing out characters we only just met. In stark contrast, Momonosuke has been sailing with the crew for hundreds and hundreds of chapters. We have had a lot of time to learn about his character, his history, his dreams, and get comfortable with him as a major character in the story. We've seen how he interacts with the rest of the crew in great detail. He is cared for by the Strawhats, protected by them in his times of need, jokes with them, argues with them, and has enjoyed multiple parties and celebrations alongside them. He has an incredibly close bond with Luffy that has evolved drastically ever since they met, with Luffy almost serving as an older brother figure to him. Luffy is consistently pushing Momo to be the best version of himself he can be, and Momo has come to rely on Luffy like a mentor and a dear friend. At this point, Momo has become deeply rooted in the Straw Hat culture. More than that, he's had time to settle in with the readers, and whether you like him or not, Momo is one of the main characters in the story right now. Currently, Yamato has none of that. Zero relationships, connections, or interactions with any of the Straw Hat pirates besides Luffy. She has no dynamic with the rest of the crew, no history with any of the other members, has not shared in their hardships, nor been a part of their growth. Every member of the Straw Hats before fulfilled all these criteria. They always have personal interactions, establish their relationships with various members of the crew, and they are all introduced early enough to get adequate screen time and character development. In almost all cases, each member gets an arc's worth of direct focus that helps integrate them into the Straw Hat fold. Even better is when they are in extreme distress, to which their newfound friends answer their call for help. Just like Nami in Arlong Park or Robin in Enies Lobby, the current arc we're in has entirely centered around Momonosuke and his dilemma. He's written to take the stage. Yamato is not like this. She is not written as a main character would be. All of her interactions have either been with Luffy or other characters specific to Wano like Shinobu. She is not the center of attention and not integral to the events leading up to here. She just feels so incredibly detached from the other Straw Hats that I have to think it's intentional, which brings up my last point. Number 5. Yamato doesn't really have a direction or purpose while Momo does. A big thing that the Straw Hats share in common is that they all have some major dream that drives them. Every single one. Luffy wants to be Pirate King. Zoro wants to be the world's greatest swordsman. Sanji wants to find the All Blue, Nami wants to map the entire world, and Usopp wants to be a great warrior of the sea. Chopper wants to cure all diseases, and Robin wants to learn about the truth of the blank century, while Frankie wants to create a ship of dreams that crosses the entire ocean. Then Brook, who wishes to reunite with Laboon, and Jinbei, who wishes for fishmen and humans to finally live in peace. Momonosuke recently had an important moment like this of his own. A point where he declared to the entire world in the face of death his dream, to become Shogun of Wano, something he is too mentally young, inexperienced, and weak to accomplish at the moment. If he wishes to carry his father's legacy forward, he's gonna have to do some growing and learning. He'll have to venture out there and learn the truth of the world, the truth about his clan, and what made his father return home. That is the major driving force behind Momo's character. Notice how all these goals that the Straw Hats share somewhat align with the end of the story around the same time that the crew would have completed their Grand Line voyage. Let me ask you a question, and please be honest. What genuine reason does Yamato have to join the crew that doesn't involve her obsession with Odin? She wanted to set sail with Ace because she wants to live as freely as Odin. Yamato tells Luffy that she will set sail with him because that's what Oden would do. And even if it is her goal to set sail, it's one that would be accomplished immediately. The moment she got onto that boat, her dream would be achieved and she would have no other driving force behind her. This is because Yamato's actions and her desires, at least to some degree, aren't her own, but rather just emulations of someone else. She didn't have some personal goal or dream aside from simply living like Oden did, and as far as Yamato is concerned, she already is Oden. Problem is, in reality, Yamato is Yamato, not Oden. Yamato needs her own goals, her own personality, her own identity. She can't just be Oden simply because she read his book or idolizes him. She can be like Oden, she can take inspiration from him and learn from his example, but the degree to which she does this is too extreme. I could say that I'm inspired by other YouTubers like Grand Line Review and Mr. Morge, that I learn from and borrow elements that I like from their channels, and that's totally fair, but I'm not gonna go around dressing like and calling myself Morge. If I was making these videos just because that's what he would do, then I'm probably on YouTube for the wrong reasons. So I can't help but question if Yamato is in it for the wrong reasons herself. A desire for freedom doesn't mean you must become a pirate. Living free isn't necessarily living like Oden, and even if it was, would living in the mold of another person truly make her free? How much freedom do you really have when you have to structure your life around someone else's? Her father, Kaido, at one point, may have similarly believed himself to be Joy Boy. Something changed over time, and Kaido went from a smiling, charismatic leader to a cynical, drunken monster. Clearly, something made him believe that strength is everything, that the way one dies and how they're remembered is more important than how they lived. Was he also going about it the wrong way? Does his daughter Yamato know what she really wants, or is she acting out of spite towards her father? Is she taking the identity of his enemy in order to run away from her identity as his child? I think it's a big possibility. This brings me to the crux of Oda's message with the Wano arc. All throughout this part of the story, we keep meeting characters who are fighting their identity. Disguises, personas, and resisting one's bloodline are a constant element looming behind almost every chapter. Both Orochi and the Scabbards had a spy in each other's faction, hiding who they truly were for the sake of their masters. The entire Straw Hat crew was forced to adopt different names and personas, living undercover as civilians while in reality plotting a countrywide rebellion. Countless other people, tainted by the smile fruits and forced to laugh even when they actually want to cry. King, a Lunarian who holds a lot of pride in his race, still feels the need to hide his true identity out of self-preservation. These themes come up again and again. The clash and dichotomy of destiny and desires, the struggle to accept one's identity or to live in someone else's shadow, the sins of the father being borne by the child. Inherited will is quite possibly the central theme of One Piece, and it's always presented in a very positive light. However, interestingly, this arc seems to play devil's advocate. Wano demonstrates that there's a negative side too. It's showing how sometimes the will you inherit can be a harmful thing. It makes clear that sometimes you can't live up to the expectations of others, and other times, regardless of this, you still have to try even if it kills you. Maybe, follow me for a second, Wano isn't just about some war or some rebellion. It's also about the burden of inherited will. Momo being forced to live up to his father's image when he is a coward and a weakling, having to sacrifice decades of his life just to be useful. Yamato being the daughter of Kaido, wanting to be like Oden, but simultaneously not wanting to be the shogun because that's what her father, Oden's murderer, wants for her. She wants to be like the samurai, but can't bear the guilt of being the offspring of their mortal enemy. No wonder she got along with Ace, a guy who was executed for being Roger's son, executed for the crime of existing. And Luffy inherited that from him, having to shoulder the burden of an entire country simply because Ace could never return to fulfill his promise. Killer, a man in a mask, who's notoriously embarrassed by his own way of laughter, ends up eating a dud smile and consequentially can do nothing but laugh, but it's his friends who laugh along with him and show him that there's nothing to be embarrassed of. Robin, the Ohara demon, had to come to terms with the past that she had been running away from for so long. She embraced the image of a demon that people place on her for the sake of protecting her friends. And then Sanji, a guy who hates his family lineage, who doesn't want to be associated in any way with his father Judge, but in order to save others he is forced to use his raid suit, his father's creation. At every possible turn, people refer to him as Stealth Black, one of the Germa, son of Judge, you name it. It happened over and over again in his fight with Queen, who happens to be a former colleague of his father's. No matter how much he runs away from it, he gets recognition for being a Vinsmoke, and now he's truly become a monster like his siblings, all because of something completely out of his control. Odin had a duty to his country as a Kozuki, which he initially chose to ignore, believing his home to be too cramped and its ways too antiquated, so he took to the sea. He resisted his destiny in search of freedom without realizing that the cost would be the freedom of everyone else he cared about. But in the end, he accepted his fate, became a martyr, and left a legacy that will eventually save his country. The whole point of this is that you can't run away from who you are. You can't escape your fate. You have to embrace it and turn it into something positive. Make it your own. No one is truly free from their destiny, but you also can't be something you're not. Everyone has insecurities, vulnerabilities, and failures under their belt. Every day, people fall short. Every day, people fail to meet expectations. People have bad days all the time, but that doesn't mean they are useless or stuck and unable to carve ahead. The strong are not the ones who never fall. They're the ones who keep getting back up no matter what. The ones who make the most out of a bad situation and embrace their destiny. So where does that leave Momo and Yamato? Well, like I said earlier, Momo still has a lot of growing to do. Even when this war is over, Wano is going to be a complete mess. All these different factions clashing right over the flower capital, all the samurai and scabbards lost in battle, all the traitors and Orochi loyalists left over back home. Meanwhile, the world government is knocking on their doorstep ready to take the country. Momo is just not ready to pick up the pieces. He doesn't have the strength or wisdom necessary to repel any invaders or to keep his country safe. How is he supposed to open Wano to the world if he can't even protect it once it's open? Thankfully, we have Yamato, someone who believes in Odin's dream wholeheartedly, with comparable strength to the man himself. She is capable and mentally mature enough to handle that kind of responsibility. I mean, her father, Kaido, clearly trusted her enough to make her shogun of New Onigashima, so without a doubt she can step up to the plate here in Wano. Thing is, Yamato only expressed disdain at the prospect of running a country because it was Kaido's idea and Kaido's desire for her, but she obviously loves the country of Wano and its people enough to suffer on their behalf for the last 20 years. Her devil fruit is even the Makami, a mythical wolf known as the guardian spirit of Wano. My hope for Yamato is that she comes to terms with who she is, that the best way for her to fight her father's legacy is to use her gifted genetics and incredible power to undo his reign of terror and protect Wano's people, just as a guardian spirit should. My hope is that she realizes she doesn't have to be Kozuki Odin to make his dream a reality, and maybe she wouldn't even have to be Shogun. Maybe she's better off being the foundation that supports and holds up the real Shogun of Wano and the real successor to the Kozuki line. This is the part where I tell you what I think is going to happen. Momo is going to have to continue on his journey with Luffy and the Strawhats. It's where he belongs right now. He was born on the sea, aboard a pirate ship. His father made that famous journey to the end of the world with Roger and learned the truth about everything. Momo, likewise, needs to learn the history behind his clan, the reason they made the poneglyphs, and the reason he can hear the voice of all things. He must go on a journey to become the man that his country currently needs. Even if he is weak right now, he will grow and change that no matter what, all for the sake of his kingdom, for the sake of his dream, to become Shogun. Remember when Odin was daimyo of Kuri? The place was a hellhole. He fixed everything there, but then left Wano shortly after. Does that mean the region became lawless again? No. In fact, someone ran the show while he was away. Odin's retainers, the 9 scabbards, and later on, his wife. So yeah, I think Momo is going to do the same and go off and become a pirate. Momo doesn't have a wife like Toki, but he has the next best thing. An older sister, Hiyori, who has spent the last 2 decades toiling in secret for the Kozuki clan. Hiyori will be the one to watch the throne while he is away. And Yamato, the guardian spirit of Wano, will find her true place as Momonosuke's head retainer. I believe Yamato will remain behind, protecting the country and safekeeping Odin's journal on Momo's behalf, revered by Wano as a hero and not a monster. Yamato will be the one, along with Momo, to open Wano's borders, and she will finally become a samurai, just like those brave men who fed her rice all those years ago. She'll finally find the acceptance and friendship she's been lacking throughout her entire life in Wano's people, who love her in return for her noble deeds. In this way, she will become Odin, not literally, but rather as a legend admired and celebrated by all. Thank you for landing on the Hidden Island yet again. It's really a dream come true to talk about One Piece with all of you like this, and coming into this new year, I just wanted to let you know how appreciative I am. If you have any dreams that you'd like to see come true in 2022, let me know down below. I hope this coming year holds nothing but the best for all of you watching, and I sincerely hope that you've enjoyed today's show, because we sure enjoyed putting it on. So, ladies and gentlemen, have a beautiful day, a pleasant night, and a wonderful romance dawn.